Good evening, you're watching AWANI Tonight with me, Faye Kwan. Met Malaysia has issued a warning of a monsoon surge from December 8th to 14th. The eastern part of peninsular Malaysia may see continuous heavy rain during this period. Meanwhile, just over 100,000 people remain displaced from nationwide floods, and the death toll stands at 6. Kelantan continues to be the most affected state, with 60,648 evacuees from nearly 19,000 families. Across the country, a total of 427 temporary relief shelters have been activated to accommodate flood victims. The floods, which began on November 24th, along with the northeast monsoon season, have impacted 9 states in the peninsula. There is no need to postpone the Sijil Pelajaran Malaysia (SPM) exams during the flood disaster. Education Director General Azman Adnan says there are many factors to consider before postponing. He also says the country faces annual flooding, especially during the northeast monsoon season. He explained that the ministry had mechanisms in place to address flood-related issues, particularly concerning public exams such as SPM and the Sijil Tinggi Persekolahan Malaysia (STPM). Azman explained that the exam schedules are carefully planned, taking into account various factors, and that any delay would disrupt other matters, including students' university admissions. He added that students taking the exams are placed in dormitories to allow them to revise comfortably, with access to study facilities such as classrooms and libraries. The ministry has so far identified 132 schools nationwide affected by the floods. The SPM 2024 examinations began today and will continue until February 6 next year. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim has called on the private sector to step up and assist flood victims, whether through financial contributions of deploying aid equipment to affected areas. He says this would allow large corporations to witness firsthand the struggles of people on the ground.
Ada baiknya dalam keadaan sekarang bukan saja dana, tetapi siap jentera biar tiap syarikat-syarikat swasta dari Kuala Lumpur, Ipoh, Pulau Pinang turun juga ke gelanggang. Pertama dia lihat masalah kehidupan rakyat, kemiskinan mereka, kesusahan, tapi dengan penuh kesabaran.
Anwar said government-linked investment companies like Khazanah Nasional, Petronas and PNB have already mobilized their subsidiaries. Local banks are also playing their part, taking proactive steps to support recovery efforts. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim has reaffirmed his call for a ban on the use of veto power in the United Nations Security Council or UNSC in cases of mass atrocities. He says the veto power has paralyzed the council, calling for reforms and inclusivity in the agency's decision-making process.
Instead of being a vehicle for action, the Security Council has too often become an instrument of deadlock. We see the consequences in places like Gaza, in the persecution of the Rohingyas, and in the war in Ukraine. Until the veto can be abolished, we must establish clear regulations governing its issue. The veto must be banned in cases of mass atrocities, require broader support from both permanent and non-permanent members, and to subject to ratification by the General Assembly through a simple majority. This is how we move towards a fairer and more accountable system, one that serves justice and action.
The Communications and Multimedia Amendment Bill 2024 introduces stricter penalties for offences committed against children under 18. Those found guilty could face up to 5 years in prison, a 500,000 ringgit fine, or both. The bill, aiming to amend the Communications and Multimedia Act 1998, was tabled by Communications Minister Fahmi Fadzil for its first reading in the Dewan Rakyat today, with the second reading set for this parliamentary session. Clause 91C proposes adding a new subsection to Section 233 that classifies child-related offences as arrestable and imposes additional daily fines of 5,000 ringgit if the offence continues after conviction. Other key proposed amendments include redefining offensive content as grossly offensive and expanding the law to cover online fraud and dishonesty. The bill also prohibits unsolicited commercial messages, with offenders facing fines of up to 1 million ringgit. The bill focuses on tackling online gambling, scams, cyberbullying, and child sexual crimes. Fahmi had said that the amendments will hold social media platforms more accountable for online harm. This will be the first proposal for amendments since the Act was enacted 26 years ago. Other than amendments to the Communications and Multimedia Act, the government is expected to table an online safety bill to curb criminal activities on social media. According to Melissa Muhammad Akhir from Kemban Collective, consultation sessions with organizations under the Online Safety Advocacy Group were rushed and lacked adequate representation, especially from children and persons of disabilities. She stresses the importance of balancing protection with freedom of expression in the proposed law.
What has been raised was that even though the intention and the objective is to protect children, one of the main points raised is to clarify what do we mean versus who do we mean who are possible perpetrators, so that it would not be peer-to-peer or a whole range of children that are caught in the provision, instead of persons who are older or with positions of power that are exploiting or abusing or taking advantage of children, for example, in the form of cyberbullying. So we would like to clarify on the approach to penalize or to sanction, so that we ensure that children are not further caught as children in conflict of the law due to this new provision. So that's just one example that I'm giving. But there's several other concerns to do with the points in the consultation, although, to be fair, also we have not seen the bill yet.
Melissa also called for the government to ensure transparency in the legislative process.
We hope there's also a parliamentary select committee process within Parliament, and if the distribution or the sharing of the bill could be earlier, there's a more opportunity to refine the language to ensure that all these concerns are addressed and to have it clearly written out.
Along with the online safety bill, Putrajaya also plans to amend the penal code to address the rise of cyberbullying. Melissa suggests the need for a separate legislation to better tackle the issue.
Some of the offences in the penal code might be confused with the offence of bullying. So although it's not called bullying, but there is criminal intimidation in the penal code. So I think there must be a specialized legislation. The legislation must cover all the aspects of bullying that occurs online. I know there were recent cases that were serious and may have affected adults in a quite crucial and fatal way, but we have to differentiate this between topic behavior that children may indulge in.
She reiterated that the harms caused by cyberbullying must also be balanced with freedom of expression to prevent misuse of the term.
It should cover things that only cause physical, mental, emotional, or sexual harm in a serious and tangible and clear manner to another person. And as you know, with children, we have to look at alternatives to the criminal process, especially if it's the first time that a child may have been in conflict of the law. So once again, that is crucial. And when we say harm, we also must look at effective, remedial, and corrective language in the law. So it's not just, it shouldn't be one size fits all. It shouldn't be everyone is punished through imprisonment for a long term.
We'll be back with more after the break. Stay tuned.
Rambut gugur lagi? Macam mana Gunakan Pantene Baharu dengan provitamin mikro yang meresap dan menguatkan rambut dari dalam. Rambut 10 kali lebih kuat terhadap rambut gugur. Pantene Baharu.
Wow! Shopee hari jadi. Shopee 12. Jom Shopee, penghantaran percuma. Dijamin harga rendah di Shopee. Jom Shopee. Jom Shopee. 12 juta ringgit voucher Shopee Live. Jom Shopee. Jom Shopee. Dijamin harga rendah 12. Shopee 12. 11-12 jualan hari jadi. Beli sekarang.
Kerap menggaru kulit kepala disebabkan kelumumut, masalahnya lebih mendalam. Gunalah Head & Shoulders baru, menembusi 5 lapisan untuk membasmi kelumumut dan kegatalan. Bebas kelumumut sehingga 100%. Head & Shoulders baru.
Welcome back. Countries negotiating a global treaty to curb plastic production have failed to reach an agreement, missing their self-imposed deadline and agreeing to extend talks. For a week, the debate was divided between the nations that want to cap plastic production and a handful of oil producers that were prepared to only target plastic waste. The 5th UN Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meeting, intended to yield a legally binding global treaty in Busan, South Korea, was meant to be the final one. However, countries remained far apart on the basic scope of a treaty and could agree only to postpone key decisions and resume talks to a later date. An option proposed by Panama, backed by more than 100 countries, would have created a path for a global plastic production reduction target, while another proposal did not include production caps. The fault lines were apparent in a revised document released on Sunday by the meeting's chair, which may form the basis of a treaty, but remained riddled with options on the most sensitive issues. A small number of petrochemical producing nations, such as Saudi Arabia, have strongly opposed efforts to reduce plastic production and have tried to use procedural tactics to delay negotiations. US President Joe Biden has pardoned his son, Hunter Biden, despite his past promises not to use presidential powers for the benefit of his family. The younger Biden was set to receive his punishment after he was convicted of making false statements on a gun background check, illegally possessing a firearm, and pleading guilty to federal tax charges. In a statement released by the White House, the outgoing president claimed that he had kept his word, even as he had watched his son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. The White House had said repeatedly that Biden would not pardon or commute the sentences of his son, a recovering drug addict who became a target of Republicans, including President-elect Donald Trump. Meanwhile, in a social media post, Trump described President Biden's pardon of his son as an abuse and miscarriage of justice. The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, or UNRWA, has suspended aid deliveries through a key crossing between Israel and Gaza due to security concerns. This deepens the already severe food crisis in Gaza as widespread hunger and deadly Israeli bombardments continue. UNRWA head Philippe Lazzarini stated on X that the Kerem Shalom crossing has been unsafe for months, with a recent large convoy of aid trucks stolen by armed gangs. He warned of a rapidly deepening hunger in the territory and called on Israel, as the occupying power, to ensure the safe flow of aid. Lazzarini also urged Israel to avoid targeting humanitarian workers following an Israeli attack on Saturday that killed 3 contractors from the U.S. charity World Central Kitchen, prompting it to temporarily halt operations. Israeli bombardment in Gaza continues without a ceasefire in sight, as the Palestinian death toll exceeds 44,000. The term brain rot has been announced as the Oxford Word of the Year for 2024. It was chosen through a public vote by over 37,000 people from a short list of 6 words, including demure and dynamic pricing.
Brain rot is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as the supposed deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state due to overconsumption of a material considered to be trivial or unchallenged. The first recorded use of brain rot dates back to 1854 by American philosopher Henry David Thoreau in his book Walden. The term reflects growing concerns on the excessive consumption of low-quality online content, particularly on social media. It has since seen a resurgence, with a 230% increase in usage from 2023 to 2024. Previous winners of the Oxford Word of the Year include Riz, derived from charisma in 2023, Goblin Mode in 2022, and Vax in 2021.
That report wraps up AWANI Tonight. Check out our web portal, keeping you informed on the critical events shaping our world. all in one place at international.astroawani.com. That's all for now. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and good night.